Welcome to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real, the podcast where people like you get the practical solutions and support you need to permanently lose the physical and mental weight so you can feel better and live the life you really want to live in the body and mind you really want to be living in. If you're looking to overcome your stress eating, overeating, binging behaviors, and move to a place of food and body freedom, as well as find more meaning and more moments of joy in life, you are in the right place. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and listening today to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real. This is where we look at the deeper work behind lasting health and healing, as well as learning really practical strategies and actionable steps you can take today to start moving yourself into the life that you want, the person you want to be, and really making those changes easier and sustainable. Today, we are focusing on one of those deeper places that sort of can be within our psyche and really lead to an inability to make changes. And this is the feeling, the emotion, the sense of shame. It's really that emotion that can leave us feeling very stuck, very isolated, and very unworthy. And shame is often one of the heaviest burdens that we as humans carry, and it very often drives behaviors that we're not proud of, like overeating, procrastinating, over drinking, over shopping, or self sabotage in general. But here's the thing, you really do not have to live under the weight of shame forever. Self forgiveness is a skill. It's a skill that you can learn. And so it's not just about this idea of what you need to do. You need to self forgive, you need to let it go. You know, how often do we hear those platitudes? They drive me insane because it's giving this message. Yes, of course, you need to do this to heal, self forgive, let it go, all these things. But we're never taught how to actually do those things. And I'm really on a mission in life right now, and have been for a few years to really teach the how part, the how of actually doing the things. Most of us know what we need to do. We hear it all the time, what we need to do to heal, we just don't learn the how. And so I'm really working to spread the word on how to actually do these things. So self-forgiveness, I really want you to understand it literally is a skill. Remember, skills can be learned. Skills are things we can practice and we can learn, and then we can embody that knowledge. And self-forgiveness is one of them. It's a skill you can learn. And when you do, it is transformative in your life and also obviously in the people around you in their lives too, because once you're in that space, it changes how you interact with all your relationships. It really changes your world, changes who you are, changes your world around you. And in this episode, we're going to unpack how the shame cycle works, why it feels so hard to get out of it, and then most importantly, how to start healing. I'm going to share some personal stories. I'm going to share examples and really practical strategies to help you break free from shame and move forward towards self compassion and growth, and ultimately that sense of freedom in life. So, first off, let's talk about what is the shame cycle. Those of you who've been listening to me for a while, I talk about this often, so you probably know, or if you've taken my online course, you learn about the shame cycle in there as well. So shame isn't just feeling bad about something you've done. It's a lot deeper than that. Shame is really about the sense of I am bad, like I am bad as a person. And it's that message that keeps us very locked in a cycle of unhealthy behavior. So there's a difference between shame and guilt. Sometimes people lump them together, but the actual sensations that come along with each feeling are different. So when shame hits us, we get the highest hit of cortisol in our body than any other emotion we can experience as humans. When we get guilt, we also get a dose of cortisol and some other biochemical reactions, but it's not near as extreme as when we are experiencing shame. So they're different in that regard. They're also different in that guilt is that I feel bad for something I did, I was impatient with my child and, I raised my voice, and that's not a value I hold. And so because I crossed that value, I felt guilty about that. And guilt can actually be a really good thing, right? We want some guilt. We want a signal of like, okay, I'm not aligned with my values. I'm doing something that doesn't align with my values. We want that signal so that we can make changes. Also, guilt is helpful within societal relations, right? We want that we want people to feel guilty when they do something wrong. So kind of we can keep that law and order, if you will, going. So guilt can actually be really, really useful in some, as long as it's not overused. But what happens with shame, and also shame can be helpful in some of those similar situations. But shame is really tricky because it's such an intense emotion. And for many of us, shame becomes chronic. So shame becomes a really big issue when it's chronic for us. And it's when we're not just guilty about something we've done. When shame is there, it's about us. I'm a bad person. I'm a horrible person. I'm not a worthy person. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Imagine you've set a goal to eat healthier, but one night you overindulge, right? Instead of thinking, I made a mistake and I can move forward, shame shows up with messages like, you're a failure, you're never going to get this right. And then those thoughts often lead to screw it eating, or just like, fine, screw it, I can't do it right anyway. And then that goes into more overeating, maybe overdrink. I mean, you can insert, when I talk about overeating and binging, you can insert any behavior that you're doing: over scrolling, over drinking, over drugging, whatever the thing is, right? Overworking. So anyway, often we get into the screw up mindset then, and more overeating, and then giving up altogether, the screw up mode. And that is the shame cycle in action. You can kind of think of it like quicksand. The harder you fight and criticize yourself, the more stuck you become. But healing starts when you learn to stop struggling against yourself. How often do we talk about that? How do we get out of the struggling piece, right? Starts when you learn to stop struggling against yourself and approach your mistakes with curiosity and with compassion. So, I want to talk about why self forgiveness becomes essential in this process. It is one of the most powerful ways to disrupt that shame cycle. But many, many people resist it. And there's often a fear that forgiving yourself means excusing your behavior or pretending it didn't matter. We often do this with other people, right? People who have harmed us, people who have done something wrong to us. We often are like, well, I don't want to forgive it because that really was a terrible behavior they did, right? It's the same with ourselves. We often think it's like, if we forgive ourselves, then we excuse if I forgive myself for binging again, now I've just excused the behavior, and maybe it'll happen again then if I just excuse it. But in reality, self-forgiveness is about acknowledging your humanity and really creating space for growth. So here's an example. I once knew someone who carried deep, deep shame about repeatedly breaking promises to themselves. By the way, this was me too. Might as well just said this is me. They wanted to exercise regularly, but kept skipping workouts. For me, it was, I wanted to quit binging, but I just kept binging, kept binging. Okay. But in this example, they wanted to exercise regularly, but kept skipping the workouts. And each time they missed a day, they tell themselves, you're so lazy, you'll never change. And over time, this shame becomes so overwhelming to our system, our physiological system, our psyche, that it paralyzed them. They stopped trying altogether because they felt it was pointless. That's what I call the screw up mode. Through self forgiveness, we worked together for a while on this. And through self forgiveness, they began to reframe their mistakes as opportunities to learn. So instead of beating themselves up, they started asking, what got in the way, and how can I set myself up for success next time? And this shift allowed them to rebuild trust with themselves. Remember, we're working on creating a healthier relationship with ourselves in order to move through a lot of these behaviors. So the shift allowed them to rebuild that trust with themselves one small step at a time. Self forgiveness does not erase the past, but it really allows us to move forward without letting shame dictate our future, without getting caught up in the cycle of shame. Let's talk about how to start forgiving yourself, some practical strategies. Healing shame is not like flipping a switch. Okay. This is not like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and now all of a sudden I'm fine. This takes some time. It is a bit of a journey. It's about taking small intentional steps, but it is so incredibly healing and freeing if you do the work. Here are some strategies to kind of get you started. So, number one is really acknowledging the shame. It's recognizing and naming the shame you're feeling. Write it down in a journal or say it out loud to someone you trust, or just say it out loud to yourself. So, for example, I feel ashamed because I yelled at my kids, or I feel ashamed because I broke my commitment to eat healthier. Naming the emotion, as always, helps you start to process it instead of being consumed by it. So when I talked in the beginning about shame becoming chronic, this is where we can really help shame be helpful to us and not become chronic by simply acknowledging it and naming it. Number two, challenge the inner critic. Shame feeds on self criticism. So the next time you notice harsh thoughts like, I'll never change, I'm lazy, I can never get this right, pause and ask yourself, is this thought true? Even if it is, if you're in that moment, yeah, this is freaking true right now, then I want you to ask yourself, is it helpful? Is this thought helpful? And then replace it. Remember our thought shifting work, replace it with a kinder, more realistic message like, I'm working on changing and I'm making progress. Or if you can't even do that, if you can't say I'm making progress, then simply just use the neutral sentence, I'm working on changing, I'm working on this. Those small shifts in self talk make a huge difference over time on what you generally feel, the emotions you have, and the sensations within your body. And it can really, really, those small shifts in your self talk really are transformative over time. Number three, this is a tough one. I know I talk about it all the time. It is hard, but it's something you want to start to practice. Remember, you're not going to be perfect at this. It's something you want to practice. You're building a skill, and that is practicing self compassion with yourself. So, imagine how you would comfort a friend who made the same mistake. Would you tell them that they're a failure or would you offer understanding? I'm guessing almost every single one of you out there would offer a friend understanding. So try speaking to yourself in the same way. You might say, I made a mistake, but I'm learning and growing. Even placing your hand over your heart while you do this can really create a sense of comfort. It can move you out of the struggle. It can drop that cortisol level. And so, really practicing self compassion with yourself. Little tip here, often like journaling is really important for this because you have to then slow your thoughts down and write out self compassionate language to yourself. So, writing a self compassionate letter to yourself, like, and talking to yourself in the way you would talk to your best friend in that journaling letter can be really, really helpful to move your mind, your brain into more of this compassionate self talk over time. Number four, really taking on the concept of learning from your mistakes. So, shame often keeps us very stuck in the past, but mistakes can be really powerful teachers. And asking yourself, what does this experience show me about my values or my needs? Good journal prompt right there. What does this experience show me about my values or needs? For instance, if you notice overeating is linked to stress, it is a signal that finding better stress management tools, learning more distress tolerance skills could really, really help here. Number five, create a forgiveness ritual. That rituals are so powerful for many of us. Sometimes a physical act, a ritual can help symbolize letting go of shame. So write down what you're forgiving yourself for on a piece of paper and then tear it up or burn it safely, right? Take precautions there. This can be a really powerful way to mark a new beginning. Also, if you have a spiritual belief system, really using that to ask for forgiveness and thanking God for his grace, like those sort of practices can really also be very, very helpful in moving through this process. But if you're not spiritual or don't have a belief system, some of like creating a ritual, that sort of thing can be a powerful way to mark that new beginning. And then number 6, I talk about it a lot, but it's really important. Focus on progress and not perfection. So forgiving yourself doesn't mean you're never going to make another mistake. We are all human. We are all going to make more mistakes. The goal is progress, not to be perfect. So celebrate the moments when you notice shame showing up and choosing and where you choose compassion instead of criticism, right? So each time you do that, each time you notice, I used compassion here. I didn't use criticism, or I was able to notice the criticism and instead moved into a neutral statement. Every time you do it, really celebrate that moment that you did it. Each time you do, you're building a new habit of self kindness. All right. So breaking the shame cycle is not easy, but it's one of the most freeing things you can do for yourself. For years, I carried shame about choices I made in life, a couple of different many different choices, but the heavy shame was from some particular couple of choices that I made. And I really thought holding on to that shame was necessary. I thought it was how I'd prove to myself and others that I was sorry. But I've learned that shame doesn't lead to healing. It really leads to hiding and isolation. Healing began when I allowed myself to, well, first of all, this is a whole other piece of it, but sometimes if we have shame around things we've done, it's important to get vulnerable. It's so important to own the thing, to really take responsibility for it. It's important if you've hurt others. I believe it's important to let them know, I own this. I know I did this to you. And I am so, so sorry, right? All of this is part of the process. But once you kind of go through that stage, you really want to get to a space where you can allow yourself to acknowledge that pain, that shame. So I really had to get to that place where I was really acknowledging the pain I was still carrying after the forgiveness, after the vulnerability, after all of that. And I really started to extend grace to myself. I started asking, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? And often those were questions after, I'd made promises to myself of not binging and then I'd binge again or I'd restrict again. And, I had to start asking, what can I learn from these things? How can I grow? How can I change what I do tomorrow to maybe shift out of that binging behavior in the evening? Those sort of things. And over time, I found that self forgiveness did not make me weaker. It actually made me stronger and more capable of living in alignment with my values. So this week, I really encourage you to take one small step towards self-forgiveness, whether it's journaling about your shame, speaking kindly to yourself, or maybe practicing a forgiveness ritual. Each step is a step toward freedom. And it's so, so worth it. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Weight Loss and Wellness for Real. If it spoke to you, if you found value, please consider sharing it with someone else you think might find value in it. Remember, self-forgiveness is a process and not a destination. Being very patient with yourself and really trusting that healing is possible, because it is. Until next time, take care of yourself and know that you are very worthy of love and grace. We will talk soon. Hi, everyone. Guess what? I have a lovely discount code just for you, my listeners. The code is 10 off. That's 10OFF. And it will get you 10% off any one of my online courses, which now include Mastering Mindful Eating, Overcome Binge Eating, Overeating, and Emotional Eating for Good. And I also have a course on When You Want to Stop the Weight Loss Medication, a comprehensive guide to weight maintenance and mastery. So if you've maybe lost some weight using a medication and you're now wanting to go off the medication but keep the weight off, this is the course for you. And any course you buy, you keep the course for a minimum of 3 years, maybe longer. It just depends on how many are purchased. All courses are self-paced, and I promise you they are practical, meaning they don't just tell you what you need to do. You actually engage in the skills and strategies needed to make actual lasting behavior change. You learn how to do the what. Okay, all courses have multiple modules with multiple lessons. All include lots of examples, tips, and tricks to make things simple and clear. And you also get lots of downloadable resources, including the daily planning template that I use with my own clients, the exact protocol to use after a binge or an overeat has occurred to minimize its damage on your body and your mind. There are protein cheat sheets, research-based journaling prompts, and the literal how-to checklists on the skill you are learning about. And with the weight maintenance course, you also have a movement module that will help you figure out how to make a movement plan that fits your particular lifestyle and level of fitness. And you also have a natural appetite regulation module. So whether if you have never tried an online course to change behavior, or if you have, I just highly would recommend that you try one of these. I've put my heart and soul into both of them. They are all research-based, and now you can get 10% off. So again, that code is 10OFF. If you're ready to make changes that last, you can go to my website, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from the main menu, click courses, and it will get you to where you want to go. Or you can click on the links in the episode description below the show. And again, as soon as you're there, when you're ready for checkout, just enter the code 10OFF, 10 off. And just a reminder, I also have an ebook cookbook that is now available. It's called Protein Forward Easy Recipes. It includes all high protein recipes, including breakfast and sweet treats full of protein and lunches and dinner. Okay, so again, head to my website. It's probably the easiest thing to do, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from there, go to courses or the cookbook. And again, use code 10 off at checkout. Did you know you can find a lot more help from me on my website? Go to heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And there you will find links to my online courses, how I work with clients one-on-one, as well as online with my coaching and counseling services that I offer. The information in this podcast is intended to provide a broad understanding and knowledge of healthcare topics. This information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered complete and should not be used in place of advice from your physician or healthcare provider. We recommend you consult your physician or healthcare professional before beginning or altering your personal exercise, diet, or supplementation program.